So let's go ahead and get started. First, I wanted to go over, a little bit about our lives in dealing with the issues that we deal with as men, particularly. Do you have anything to start with, Euler?
I can start. I'll give everybody a bit of a kind of a backstory about me. Um, I grew up in a very kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Like quite a poor area where I grew up. I grew up on an estate in the UK, kind of a very rough place to live. A lot of families from very low social economic backgrounds and kind of low income families, that kind of thing. Which obviously came with a lot of its own kind of difficulties. As a young man, I was always really interested in performance art. So as opposed to like pursuing sports and these kind of things, I was off doing contemporary dance, was taking part in musical theatre, this kind of thing. Faced kind of a lot of difficulty from my peers regarding those choices and kind of pursuing my passion in that. Spent a lot of my life milling around, spent a lot of years squatting, doing kind of things like that, traveling the world a little bit, playing a lot of music. And I find myself here today. I'm in my 30s. I work a 9 to 5 job, and I've got a son. I've got a young boy, aged 4 years old. Um, and that's about it. That's a brief background of me before we kind of get into the depth of the discussions.
Okay. Um, I guess a little about me, probably things that I've talked about before, but I've grown up very supported by my parents. I've grown up with a very nice family. I can't say I've had many um, difficulties as far as wealth range. I didn't necessarily grow up poor. I think a middle class family is kind of where I have been at. My father worked all the time. He was the one that was working when we were growing up. My mother basically stayed home and took care of us. So he was out a lot, and we used to live back in Tennessee when I was growing up. So when he got a job over in Reno, which is where I am currently, he would go over there for a month or two at a time to kind of get prepared and get some money, and we'd be without him for quite a while most times. So when he did come home and we had him around, it was very nice to spend time with him. But I mainly spent a lot of time with my mom, and I think I get a lot of things from her. Um, However, I get a lot of things from my father as well, as far as like the man aspect, I guess. And we'll get further into this topic later. But I would say I'm more of my mom's side as far as emotional, sensitive. So I might be a little different to most men out there. As far as going through school, I've talked about in high school trying to do football, handle football and band at the same time because I wanted to fit in, so I wanted to do football, but I also really loved music, which I started in middle school, and that kind of fell through, and I ended up ditching football to try to fit in order to go do what I loved during that time. So I definitely say I'm on a different side of what's going on right now. I guess that's basically what I have to say about that. I want to go ahead and just go into the next topic. I want to talk a little bit about like the stereotypes and stigmas of men and kind of what role they play in society and how that's kind of changing over time. Do you have anything to say about that?
I mean, I think if we're going to talk about the greater cliche and the greater stereotype of what a man should be, let's just hit on like a couple of key points that everybody is going to be thinking when asked this question. Typically, it's going to be that a man should be strong, that a man should be a provider, that a man should be working, that a man should be physically strong as well as emotionally strong, and that a man should, I mean, let's talk about it. A man should be into sports, right? A
Mm,
man should be into cars. A man should, I don't know, a man should like fighting. Some people stereotype of things. A man should go hunting.
be
A man
aggressive.
should aggressive. That's exactly it. A man should be macho. A man should be unchallengeable. There should be a picture of strength. and that's about it. I mean, that's like and I guess most people's initial thoughts when they think about a stereotype of a man is what I would say.
Absolutely. And now it's like it's starting to change a little bit, but we see where we've come from, and as far as all those stereotypes, you know, we're supposed to be the one out there doing the work, providing for families. We're supposed to be, you know, strong enough to deal with our own inner struggles and battles to the point where a lot of men don't ask for help because they feel like they have to handle everything themselves. We have stigmas of how men should treat women, but we don't really have, you know, ideas of how men should treat other men. In a sense, it's a little less on the importance of people talking. But I don't know. What do you think about that in the difference of how men treat other men as opposed to treating women?
Now, there's a lot to talk about when we kind of start thinking about this, and I think you're absolutely right in what you said. There's kind of, I think there's, I mean, certainly within like Western culture, I think there's a really broadly accepted way of how a man should conduct himself towards a woman. This idea of like chivalry, this idea of being a gentleman, this kind of thing, right? But it's never discussed. And I mean, if you kind of think back to like ideas of like honor amongst men and kind of shit like this, is I don't really know, dude. That's it's a complicated question because there's a lot of unwritten rules in kind of modern society that, like, I mean, let's talk about one. You should never raise your fist to a woman, right?
Hmm.
And there's this kind of thing. And if you think back to all the cliches of like a gentleman laying his coat across a puddle so a fair lady could cross it without getting her shoes wet, and this kind of thing, I've never heard anything at all growing up about how I should conduct myself in such a way towards another man. I
I think
feel there's. Go on, Cash.
I think it's almost kind of pre-placed in our minds that other men are a source of competition. Like we should always try to be better than all of them, and we should always
Absolutely.
be at top. And I think that's the only thing that I can think of that has been kind of there in my mind when I'm growing up.
Yeah, another man is viewed as a potential challenge or a threat,
Hmm.
potentially. It's a
Sorry.
strange one because I think a lot of people's. You spoke, Kashak, in the beginning about kind of your relationship with your dad growing up with your father. And I think a lot of men of all ages, they're kind of like, so their school of thought and their mindset in so many ways is going to be molded by that interaction from such a young age.
Hmm.
Now, I'll share some things if I'm not going too off topic about my having grown up and the influence and the impacts that my father had on that. And it's really bizarre. So, what I'd like to tell you is a fairy tale story of how my dad was this really kind of strong individual, how he was like a model of what a man should be, and he was really inspiring to me and helped me make the decisions and become the person I am today. But that is, unfortunately, I love my dad. I absolutely do. But that's not the truth. Growing up, my dad was in prison. I witnessed a lot of domestic abuse as a child. That's been deeply traumatic and is stuck with me till this day. There's lots and lots of things I witnessed as a young man that I wish I'd never have seen. And thankfully, I'm in a position where I've not let those experiences mold my ideas of what being a man means to me. So I think people's relationships with their fathers have a massive impact on what being a man should be. But in kind of my respect, that wasn't really the case. I've had to kind of figure that out on my own.
I completely agree. I think that the way that we look up to our fathers when we're young, as well as the way that we see others in society, particularly for me, has shaped me. My dad, on the topic of masculinity, you know, he's a great guy. I love him. He's very conservative, and he plays kind of into stereotypes as far as, you know, he's very stubborn. He doesn't ask for help when he needs it, if he needs it, and when he's wrong about certain things, he will not apologize. He will not go against his word. Like what he says is true in his mind. And so he's a very stubborn man. And I definitely can see that I have gained that sort of mentality in a way. As far as going through life, I'm very stubborn with myself and asking for help. I don't like to ask other people. I feel like I should be handling everything myself, almost because of how I viewed him and how he was during my childhood, as well as looking outward to other people. Hearing about your situation, it's like I know this is wrong, but I always think when I see or hear about these kind of things that my issues with masculinity and whatnot are not as dire or you know big as other people's issues. So that almost reinforces the idea that I should be able to handle everything on my own because I'm not dealing with much, you know?
But to be honest, Cash, I think that's a really kind of human mindset to have, is
Mm.
what I'd say. I mean, obviously, the topic of today's podcast, I like putting the H in there, is men's health awareness. But I mean, across gender, I do think that's a very kind of human thing. And it's about people wanting to take ownership of kind of solving their own problems. You know what I mean? Because
Mm.
I think you have that kind of sense of, I mean, some people feel embarrassed that they've got problems in the first place. But then I think also like when you can take sole responsibility for having been the solution to that problem, I think people take like a really good sense of pride in that. You know what I mean? There's like you feel really positive when you manage if you manage to achieve that outcome.
That's
I
true.
think it's really human to keep your problems to yourself for the most part.
I think for me, I'd like to think and say that I have a big heart for others. And I think for me, it's basically I find myself a burden to others if I ever ask for help or place my problems on them. I feel like that is my responsibility, and they have their problems that they're dealing with, and that I shouldn't place more on it. And I think that's where it comes from for me.
I respect that. I respect that. I mean, I've had a lot of difficulty discussing issues that I've faced, be that financial problems, be that career problems, be that relationship problems, or kind of mental health problems, you know?
Mm.
Um, and let's face it, it's hard. It's hard to vocalize that stuff because I mean, there's a lot of aspects to it. One, I kind of think, why are my problems important to anybody else? The second, it's difficult to expose yourself like that, to put yourself in that vulnerable situation, to show your vulnerabilities, to show your, for want of a better word, because I don't mean this, weaknesses,
Mm.
because it's only you that perceives them that way. And it's you putting yourself on the line. And when we talk about that kind of that vision of what stereotypical masculinity is, it's the antithesis of everything we're just talking about there, about showing that vulnerability, about showing that openness. That's not what these preconceptions that we've grown to understand as being masculine is, if that made any sense.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I can see it now. Like I'm still dealing with these issues of what they've coined toxic masculinity in society now. And I think a lot of men do. I don't know if a single man has really gotten past all of um, that box that people put us in of how we're supposed to act and how we're supposed to behave. Um, that's why I want to get into a little bit more of our gender roles. I know that with the stereotypes and stigmas, it kind of basically that is basically shown what the gender roles are for men. And I don't want to delve into women's gender roles too much, but I think that should be talked about a little bit. If you have anything to say about that, as far as how
I'll
they
do exactly what
interplay, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I'll do exactly what I did when you asked me the same thing about from like a from like a male quote unquote perspective. So I guess if you were asked the stereotypical characteristics of a woman, that would be to have children, to stay at home, to keep a clean home, to keep a happy family, to you know what I mean, to clean the house, to do the laundry, to do the cooking. to do these kind of things and to be a good wife,
Mm.
to do that thing. And that's what's marketed to young women. I mean, from birth, when you look at the kind of toys and things that are marketed across the two genders, there's a binary clear as day. You know what I mean? It's this like pre-prescribed path that because you are a young woman, this is what's destined for you in the future.
Hmm.
Even if you go back a couple of decades and you look at kind of education, and I know that I'm speaking for the UK here, but I'm sure it was probably the same case in the US, that a lot of young women wouldn't have the opportunities to go pursue academic education, that have been put into schools to learn skills such as knitting, sewing, cooking, all these kind of things, this kind
Hmm.
of like home economic kind of curriculum that was aimed at young women to be these stay-at-home mums and these stay-at-home good housewives. And that's a really negative stereotype, but I think that's a stereotype that a lot of people would think of when if we're having this conversation.
Absolutely. And I just want to back up that, I the reason that we need to delve into this a little bit is because I think that men's issues completely like play with women's issues as far as gender roles, because when we have these stereotypes and stigmas, women who are still in this kind of box that they're placed in as well will absolutely make the role for men stay the same. I think talking about this, what we're trying to do, what a goal is to change stigma, is to change these beliefs of how people should be. And if one gender or one side is still kind of stuck in that box, I think it'll kind of slow the other down, or it'll also bring that other down. If you get what
Yeah,
I'm saying.
it essentially reinforces the other.
Exactly. So I know that both of these sides are an important part of the issue. Um, but I guess that might be for another topic at another time. I just kind of wanted to bring that up and how I felt about that. Um, I don't see many questions or comments, so I think we're going to move on. Remember, if you have anything, don't feel free to post, share, put in the chat. Let's go over the physical issues with men's health. And I don't really know too much about this. I'm not at the age yet, but I haven't even thought about this stuff, and I feel like a lot of men should be thinking about this as far as prostate, testicular cancer, heart disease, all these things that men will have to deal with sometime in their life, and how they can better be prepared for that, I think, is the best way to say it.
From my perspective, Cash, I am not the picture of health. I'm far from the picture of health. So I'll be in about 2 weeks, I'm going to be 33 years old. So I think 3 years since is when I got my first kind of postal reminder saying that I should probably go for some kind of prostate exam. Have I been for a prostate exam? No, I have not.
Hmm.
Do I have any intention of going for one soon? No, I don't. When I get ill, do I go see my GP? No, I don't. When I injure myself, do I go seek medical attention? No, I don't. Because the bottom line is, I'm a stupid man,
Hmm.
and I feel like it's okay. It'll pass. I can deal with it. I'm hard, is what we'd say around here. I'm proper hard, mate. It don't matter. And I think when we're talking about just general health and well-being, I mean, if you think about this, like again, this kind of really cliched stereotype of a man, it's like, oh man, eat meat. This kind of thing, this really unhealthy lifestyle. What does a man do on a Friday? He goes and drinks loads of beers. So fucking bad for you. Like, and I remember it like in school or whatever, like if a kid got a salad for lunch, they'd be mocked for that. Like a young man, I mean, things are evolving more so now, and I know we were talking about this a little bit beforehand. But like I know, so let's say if I went to go work a construction job near me, and I have worked these kind of jobs before. So this is a prime example, actually. Quite a lot of years ago, I was vegan. I was vegan for quite a long time. And I worked on a building site there, and I was working with a joiner. And as I'm sure you can imagine, these work environments, very male
Mm-hmm.
dominated, very male orientated. And you see people from all walks of life working in these industries. So when I pull out my lunch at lunchtime, bearing in mind everybody's eating these big sandwiches full of bacon and sausages and eggs and fried meats, all this shit every day, and I'd pull out my salad, my tofu, whatever else, I would be bullied. I mean, and I don't just mean like a bit of banter. I mean, we're talking homophobic language, homophobic slurs, physical bullying. People would like throw my lunch around the thing just because I had this like different dietary preference. It's just because my lunch wasn't fried meats, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that all kind of plays into men's health as well, and what you said about heart disease and this and that, because the bottom line is if I keep that up and I keep eating that way, soon enough I'm going to be 40 years old and I'm going to have diabetes or have a stroke.
Right.
And there's so much stigma around it. As I say, I've experienced this firsthand. Disgusting homophobic language based on trying to eat something healthy at lunchtime, all because I'm a man. And as I say, with the other stuff with the GP, I mean, to be honest, I have a bit of a white coat phobia. I'm terrified of the doctor and the dentist and everything else. I hate going to that stuff and I avoid it at all costs. Absolutely. And I think it's a scary thing for a lot of men, especially when we start talking about things like prostate cancer. I mean, another thing comes with that as well, because obviously, I mean, let's get into it now. Um, it's quite an invasive procedure.
Mm-hmm.
I've not been for one yet. And then obviously you've got like stigmas of sexuality that come with that. And I'm not going to mince my words. Nobody's look. Not a lot of people. Well, nobody is in a medical sense looking forward to going to go get a finger stuck up their ass. You know what I mean?
Right.
No, nobody wants to do that. And you'll get so many men that are essentially going, "I'm not going to the doctor to get a finger stuck up my ass. What you want about?"
Mm-hmm.
And that's the sad reality of it. And the thing is, I'm in no hurry to go either because I'm terrified. Not only that, I'm terrified that the procedure will be uncomfortable and I'll feel really embarrassed. It's because what if that one day that happens and they say, actually, the oiler, can you come in for a scan?
Mm.
That terrifies me to death. You know,
Yeah.
I can't express how scared I am about that ever being a reality.
And I think that's a big thing for a lot of men. I think it's a big thing for a lot of people in general. Um, I don't remember the last time I've been to the doctor, and that's probably a bad thing to say. But yeah, I agree with you that unless the pain is incredible or the illness is terrible, I'm not probably going to go to the doctor. And it's very bad. I think what we need to talk about is the fact that taking these preventative measures can save many years off of your life. The plant-based diet will actually help. It actually helps quite a lot in preventing these sort of diseases and cancers, especially diabetes. Um,
Hmm.
Taking care of yourself is very important, and men don't really do that quite well. To my, in my opinion, like for me, I can't say that uh, going vegan or having these sort of things would have been much of an issue. Um, I'm sure it is in school, but outside of that, I haven't experienced it myself, so I don't know how it is in America. But
I think,
there's
sorry, Kashak.
no, go for it.
I think anybody that wanted to make that kind of dietary shift now, or anybody that is kind of living the vegan lifestyle or vegetarian lifestyle in 2020, and I'd say over the course of the last decade, is in a really kind of advantageous position
Mm,
because I know that you get your Facebook things and you get all these kind of debate threads about I couldn't live without bacon, these kind of basic arguments. But the thing is now vegan food and everything else is much more readily available than it was when I was in my 20s. It was actually quite difficult to live that lifestyle then, but now you go to any major supermarket, there's vegan options, there's vegan alternatives, and it's much more kind of it's readily available on a commercial level. You've got like the biggest fast food chains in the world now catering to vegan diets, which was it was unheard of. It
yeah,
was unheard of a long time ago. So it was harder. I'd say as not as far back as 5 years ago, it was much more difficult to kind of take those healthier options if that's something that you were inclined to do.
I think it's much more widely accepted now in current times. It's not very because we're going through all these changes as well in different communities as far as, gay marriage and all that. It's in the way that we treat um, people with different sexual, I don't know what you call it, orientation or preference. But I think the way that the world is kind of growing, that might be less of an issue as far as it. I mean, it's always going to be around, obviously, but I think that's moving in a positive direction, and I think that might be an easy route to take for some people. Obviously, going vegan is difficult in itself, but it's a really good way to go, and it's something that I've been thinking about quite a lot too. And
I'd
moving
say
back,
now.
oh,
Go on. Sorry.
I was gonna say
Saying
moving
now.
back to your
Yeah.
to your medical, worries and such. I think the main thing is that we're all afraid of hearing bad news. We're all afraid of hearing that we have some sort of problem, but it's quite common, sense or logic to think if I go in for these checkups and I hear something bad, if at least if I go in and get this checkup, I will know what I have to deal with early on, and it won't be as big of a problem as if I waited forever or just, you know, died without even knowing. I think taking the preventative measures is the best option, because even if you're scared of what's going to come from that or what's going to happen, you'll be taking care of it, and you might be able to treat it or something early on, you know.
Yeah, it's true. It's very true. And I think the when we're talking about seeking kind of medical attention in terms of these preventative measures, that, and I'm sure you're going to segue to this, that doesn't only relate to when we're talking about kind of physical
Yeah,
illness.
absolutely. I've talked about that before in our first episode here, but a lot of people don't even seek mental health, help as far as therapy or anything like that. And that's super important, especially for men, because, suicide rates for men are so high in comparison. Um, and it's because we don't go out and seek help. We try to fight everything on our own, and we think it's just our problem to fix. And it's probably
I'm in my,
also the same as hearing bad news in that sense.
of course. So I'm only in my early 30s, and there's 5 people in my life so far that I have lost to suicide, and I bet you can't guess what gender they all were.
Hmm. You want me to?
No,
Okay.
it was a rhetorical question. All 5 of them were men.
Yeah.
So kind of personally for me, having I've had to go seek help for my own mental health over the course of, say, the last 6 or 7 years now. It was really nuts what was going on. And I don't mind just giving you the blow by blow, really. I was away on tour. We were about to cross the border into Switzerland, and we were just driving along, and I started having these sensations in my body like I'd never had. I mean, the only way I can describe it, my teeth were vibrating. It felt like I was having electric shocks around my whole body. I couldn't breathe. I genuinely thought that's it. I was going to die there and then. I actually passed my phone to my friend. I said, text my mum, tell my mum that I love her. I got my friend on the other phone. I was like, ring the emergency number for Europe, ring it now. And these French paramedics had to come out. They gave me an ECG, got me in the back of an ambulance, everything else. And the guy essentially just slipped me a Valium, and his words were, "You've just got to be cool, man." So essentially, I'd had a panic attack for the first time. And I never knew what a panic attack was until I'd had that. It was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. And as a little side note, I've got to say, as awful as it was, I'm very grateful for it because it helped me learn a great deal of empathy for other people that are living with anxiety disorders. Because until I'd experienced that, there was no way I could truly understand what it was like for other people. Um, Kind of moving on from that, that was something that I lived with for quite a long time after that. I tried to deal with them myself for the best part of maybe 18 months to 2 years, to the point where it became kind of really unbearable. And then it was only at that point when I went to go see my GP, I went to go see my doctor. And then I started going through kind of different kinds of, well, I went to cognitive behavioral therapy to try and help me suppress the panic attacks and these kind of things, because I was living in constant fear of another panic attack because
Mm.
they were so awful. It's like I'd have a panic attack, I'd come down from that, But then my anxiety just amplify and amplify and amplify and amplify because I was expecting another one to come.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of my anxiety things were based around my health, ironically. So I've got health anxiety and I live with that still. Um, and they tried to kind of medicate me. They tried to give me beta blockers and sleeping pills and these kind of things, which I refused to take for two reasons. One, I didn't want to medicate it, and I didn't want to take anything that altered my body in a way because a lot of my anxiety still is around my heart.
Mm.
I always think that my heart's going to stop beating or something's going to go wrong. I'm going to have a stroke. I'm going to have a heart attack, this kind of thing. And beta blockers regulate your heart rate. So I was terrified of that. My mental health was so low that I wouldn't even take the medication recommended to me by a doctor because I didn't believe that they made decisions that were right for me. I was scared of the decisions that they'd made. It was really weird. So I went through this therapy anyway, and it was really, really positive for me. And I've still kind of got lingering things, and this went on for quite a long time. And it has kind of, I've had what's the word I'm looking for? I've kind of like backslid a little bit from time to time, where these kind of anxiety things come back and they go and they come and they come and they go. But it's really hard for me now, even having gone through this whole process once and learnt the lesson the hard way, to admit to myself when I feel like these issues are coming back to the forefront. Because
Yeah.
it's almost difficult that I don't want to admit that they're there again. And it's almost like fight that battle a second time. And now, that's not only for me, that's not just to conserve my pride. That is because I want to safeguard and kind of shield my family from that potentially being a reality.
Mm.
Because I know that the whole process of me becoming well in that respect wasn't only difficult for me, that was difficult for my mum, that was difficult for my dad, that was difficult for my partner, that was difficult for my friends, it was difficult for everybody. And I don't want to put them through that again. Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, and this is what we're talking about with that toxic masculinity. Basically, end the podcast. I'm the perfect picture of toxic masculinity right there. I've just confirmed it. I'm trying to shield my loved ones from any sort of pain and hurt by even admitting that I am still struggling with my mental health.
Absolutely. Any chance I get, I typically hide it as well. And I've talked about this before. I go through these cycles every year where I can almost sense that things are coming back, but I definitely suppress it as well. And I assume that I'll be okay. And then it gets to a point where it's almost, borderline suicidal, unfortunately. And that is when I decide to go back and get help. And because I feel like I can handle it almost up to that point, and then I go in, I talk with somebody, and even just talking to somebody kind of makes me feel better because I don't usually talk to anybody about any of the biggest problems that I deal with. It's hard, especially with other men. I think that's an issue too. I don't open up to other guys quite well. It's very difficult. And going through that cycle every year, I feel like it just gets worse and worse. But yet I still do it. I still do it every year. And I still suppress myself, and I still, lie to my family and say that I'm all right most days, um, until I can't handle things. So I think I completely understand where you were at. I've had that sort of situation with a panic attack. I can't say I've had many, but I've definitely had a few, and they're quite terrible. And looking at them from the outside, you don't understand what's going on at all. It just seems quite weird. But what's going on the inside is very frightening, and I don't know. It's very hard to understand if you've never been through one. So
I'm definitely guilty of it. I mean, so I know people that have had anxiety disorders also. I mean, naturally, of course I do. But before I understood, I always used to think that somebody saying, "Oh, I'm having a panic attack," it was just like a dramatic thing that people would say to be like, "Oh, I'm a bit stressed," and I'd be like, "Stop being silly." That
mm,
was generally my response. I was like, "Stop being soft, stop being silly." And it wasn't until I experienced it myself that I could not regret the times I said that more. I really couldn't. If I could go back and apologize to those people, I would, like with all my heart, because I didn't understand. I didn't.
yeah, I think we get so blindsided, um, with how we are and how we feel, and that we've not gone through that before, and we just don't understand, and people don't. And that's the biggest issue, is like, I can't say that I wish everybody would go through this once, because it's terrible, and I don't think people should even do that. But it's really hard to get people who have not experienced these things to understand what's going on, even when we talk to them and tell them how we feel. I don't know. That's another complex topic to even go over. But yeah, I think as far as maybe a generalized advice, physical and mental, go seek help when you need it, and go do at least an annual checkup with your doctor, like, just to make sure everything's okay. Wouldn't you rather know that you're doing fine and you're healthy than sitting there not getting help and just worrying all the time that you have things? I worry all the time when I'll worry that I have some sort of disease or that I have diabetes because I eat so shitty. And obviously I don't go and check. And I think that's one of the biggest issues, is just going and getting help when you need it. Do you have any sort of advice in line with that?
All I can really say is the times when I have been to seek medical help for whatever that may be it physical or not, I can't describe the feeling that I've had when I've left that place. So, I mean, so I don't mind telling you this. Essentially, in January, I had to take leave from my job. I had to go off on the sick because my mental health had deteriorated so much again. So I've actually got a prescription at the minute for, what does it say on there? I think it says anxiety and depressive disorder. So that's what I've got, and I've been medicated for that again, which again I'm not taking because I'm an idiot. But in January, despite being at like one of my all-time lows, to the point I was thinking about leaving my job, I was going to do all sorts of things. I was essentially, I don't know. But when I left there in that first instance, I actually felt joy. I felt this relief. I felt a happiness that was really bizarre, just because I'd taken that step. I actually felt good in spite of obviously feeling so low at the point that I could leave with a diagnosis such as that.
Mm.
That was like a light through it all. I actually felt really good that I'd done that. It was really rewarding for me to do that, because not only it validates everything for me, is what I'll say.
Mm.
So, kind of going back to the first instance where I went to CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy, when I went and spoke to this individual, I was so, what's the word? I was so pessimistic about the whole process. I went in there with a really negative mindset. And after speaking to this woman for a couple of weeks, what she really helped me realize is that I wasn't crazy. That the things I was feeling and the things I were experiencing were human. They were almost validated for me. It wasn't these kind of manifestations of my mind. It wasn't something that was escalating. It wasn't something that was out of control. I wasn't losing myself in any way. They helped me realize that everything I was encountering, it's exactly what I just said. They were really human thought processes.
Mm.
And even going to see this GP in January and him saying that, I completely understand where you're coming from. This is completely normal. This is what we need to do.
It's an
It
internal
helps so much.
battle, and that's why we don't see that from people on the outside world, that people actually go through these things and these issues. So we think we're alone until we actually go and find out that we're not, and that this is human and this is natural and it is going to happen. So I agree with what you said, absolutely. I think we should maybe discuss some chat, since I've been lacking on that. This one comes from Parallax Party. He says, when I was a kid, my biological father used to yell at me when I crossed my legs and call me a bitch. I grew to resent him for it and started crossing my legs whenever possible. I think a lot of my effeminate demeanor comes out as a way of spiting my father, because anytime I showed any weakness, he'd call me a bitch, and I hated it. I don't think, in my experience, I've had issues with this. Certainly not with my father, because honestly, he's a bit effeminate himself, and he crosses his legs too. But I always cross my legs, and I think I've had more of this issue with peers from school. I don't know why that's such an issue, like why that became a thing. Um, I guess obviously because it's covering your crotch or something, but it seems kind of silly that that has become such a big stigma. You know?
I think they're saying that if you had bigger balls, you wouldn't be able to cross your legs.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing, and it's so silly. It's so stupid. I don't get where that came from and why it's such a big thing.
It's ridiculous. I've got literally got my legs crossed right now
Yeah.
because it's comfortable. You sit how you're comfortable, but I think the main thing I take from what Parallax is saying, and it's something again we spoke about briefly in the beginning. It's about that. It's about that kind of language. I mean, I experienced it a lot, kind of as I said earlier, kind of pursuing the things that I did when I was younger. I was called what was I called? I was called a pussy. I was called a puff. I was called all different kind of homophobic slurs and all these kind of really gender based slurs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? All like really. So you bitch, you're a fanny, you're a pussy, all
Mhm.
these kind of things, and they're also gender focused. It's really weird. If you think about the kind of insults that men use towards each other, they're all quite feminine words, aren't they? Or like homophobic words, and they refer to sexuality or they refer to gender
Yeah.
as anything other than cis heterosexual male is bad.
Mhm. I think that stems from men are a group of their own, and so are women in this sense, and you absolutely try to fit in no matter what to your role or your gender. And when they use these sort of words of the opposite gender, it pushes you out. It makes you an outlier or an outcast, and that's the reason why people use it. But it's also kind of silly in the fact that it shouldn't be like, I don't know, it shouldn't be hurtful or too hurtful in that way. I don't know. Do you get what I mean in a sense?
Yeah, I do. So I'm gonna like go off on a bit of a sideline here. There's a big thing I have to kind of challenge at work quite often. I think essentially what you're saying is that those words shouldn't necessarily be an insult because they're associated with a gender, right?
Yeah.
So something I have to combat at work quite a lot is so I work with kids that get kicked out of school. So I work with kids that have got behavioural difficulties. And what they often like to do is to go, "Oh, he's being well gay. Oh, I'm not doing that. That's really gay. I'm not doing it." And using the term gay as a negative
Mm.
adjective for something. And we have to kind of, we have to challenge that and break that down and go, "Okay, but why is gay being bad?" And they go, "Oh, I don't mean that, sir. Sir, I don't mean that. I don't think there's all wrong with being gay." But then I go, "Right, well, consider the language that you're using." So when somebody might call somebody a bitch, when it's kind of not in jest, you know what I mean? Like, "Oh, stop being a bitch." Then it's
Mm.
like, but they're going, "Oh, well, I'm not saying that in like a misogynist way. I'm not saying that in a sexist way. I don't mean to be like demasculating with that because gender's not really part of it. It's just language. But we need to evaluate the language that we use because obviously it's got those connotations with it. So with these kids that are saying things are gay all the time, then by proxy, of course, that's putting into people's minds that being gay is a negative thing.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
You give it power.
Correct, exactly. And that's exactly the same thing when we're using these kind of gender aligned insults or this gender aligned language, because I can't think of an insult that people use commonly that doesn't have something to do with gender or a sexual organ or a sexual orientation.
Or appearance
I'm not,
based.
yeah.
Mhm.
If
I
somebody did say to me once, the only one that should be acceptable is asshole because everyone's got an asshole. But
That's true. Yeah. No, I think it's because people use these so frequently, probably because of past times and the way that we viewed these people beforehand. And it's valued that word so much in the direct connotation of what it's not really supposed to mean, but it's been given so much power that it's become a bad thing when it shouldn't be used at all. And I think that's one thing that everybody probably needs to become aware of in themselves. I think, I probably use some of these words on a day-to-day basis without even thinking about it. But I think it's a goal for everyone to probably try to be more aware of what they're saying and what words they're using in everyday life.
And I think also in terms of Parallax's comment, it coming from a father figure as well. And
Yeah.
as he's saying now, kind of with your body language and how you sit and your whole posture and your demeanor and everything, that's obviously something that stuck with you. And that's, I'd say that's true for everybody. Even it's what it's nurture, not nature, in it. And that's the
Mm,
thing. And there's a lot of kind of people's mindsets evolve and people's character evolves based on their experience growing up and through life. I mean, we can only evolve based on what we experience.
mm. And there's two big influences in your life, mainly, which is your parents when you grow up. And then after that, it's your peers when you go to school. And I've had my issues with my peers, you know. I've been told that the way I walk is gay. I the way that I dress is gay. But it also happens with parents who just don't understand, or they're stuck in that past mindset. And so that can really be a big deal in shaping who you are and giving you more problems to deal with than you should be dealing with in your future, you know. Go ahead and go to Bearded Bandito's comment. I never sought help because it was looked at as being weak in the military. As much as they promote getting help, many look down at those who sought help. Now, I don't have any military experience or background, but you can definitely tell what the military is like in a sense. And definitely, since it's more male populated, you're going to get a lot of that strong versus weak, not asking for help sort of situation. I don't know. Do you have any insight into this comment, Euler?
I can't, similar to Kashak, I've got no military experience. I think the military, though, and the idea of what masculinity is and what being a man is, though, I think the two run in parallel
Mm.
quite pertinently, really. And I think I see it a lot. And I mean, personally, I'm not overly fond of the military. I'm
Mm.
not. I mean, I'm against war, I'm against conflict. And what I'm particularly against with the UK military, anyway, is the way in which they market to vulnerable young men. The way I've seen them market in their kind of marketing campaigns is essentially targeting young men with not many kind of prospects coming out of education, people that are essentially coming from not very stable family backgrounds or very stable family homes, and essentially making these young men promises, giving these young men kind of aspirations of kind of qualifications and education, and they market it in such bizarre ways. These adverts, these commercials that I see on TV, they make it out like they're going on a action movie adventure. When
Mm.
And I think the two are very paralleled. It's like, want to be a man, join the army,
Oh yeah.
and I think the two run very much side by side. I mean, I can't speak for everybody's reasoning to go into the military, and I certainly mean no disrespect to you in what I'm saying, bearded bandido. But within that, I can definitely see that being a culture of, why would you go talk to the shrink? You know what I mean? Are you not a strong man? And it'd be those kind of questions, wouldn't it? It'd be like, you're this, you're that, you're whatever, for going to seek the help. And I can certainly see that breeding much more aggressively in that kind of environment with all the testosterone pumping.
And I can never really understand why it has to be that way. Um, I get it that it's a male dominated group and it's all about army strong, you know, whatnot like that, and the way that they use propaganda to enlist other young men and kind of giving them an option when they might not have had or thought they had any other. And that's definitely terrible. I agree with you there. I don't really like that. But I don't understand why it has to be that way with the military. Because if you're thinking about it, you know, I don't support war at all. I don't support violence. But if they were to go out and fight in a war, mental health is a big issue with that as well. And you see a lot of, military men coming back with PTSD, and you see a lot of military men coming back with all these issues. And I don't think that's all from war. I think that's definitely a part of it. Absolutely, it's terrifying. But I think it's also from the way that they're treated in this institution or in this, culture.
People can get PTSD from things that seem insignificant in comparison to like first-hand witnessing some actual like atrocities of war and some like real, some brutal injuries and kind of fatalities and these kind of things. I mean, my missus has genuinely got PTSD from giving birth,
Hmm.
like diagnosed with that, because that was a really traumatic experience, was the whole birthing process of my child. So imagine what it's like seeing somebody get shot firsthand.
Hmm.
And the mindset of that you should not seek support after witnessing something like that, that is mind blowing to me. That is mind boggling, because nobody in this on this earth is that much of a machine to not be affected by witnessing something like that.
Right. All right. Moving on. Um, Crimson Duck says, I don't take my medication for anxiety either. I think the same as Euler when he said he doesn't want something to control him. Quite silly because of that, too. No, I mean, I don't think it's silly. Um, 'Cause some medication can harm you, and it's okay to be cautious about that, even when it's prescribed by doctors, because they're not always well educated or correct on the subject. I think it's definitely taking caution when you try medication, but it's also helpful in some cases, if not most cases. And I don't know, that's the tricky conversation.
What I would say about that is, I think you've got to know what's right for you, essentially. I think it's a different thing. It's not like you've got an infection, you must take these antibiotics. It's not that, because I think from my experiences and any prescriptions that I've had, essentially it's all seemed very exploratory by the doctor. So the last lot of pills I were given, they were essentially saying, try these for a bit, or just take one and see how it goes. And there's no kind of binary right or wrong answer
Hmm.
with those things. And I think it's about knowing when it's right for you and when it isn't. I know people that do medicate because of mental health issues that they have ongoing. And the medication that they're taking is really, really helpful for them. And all power to those people that are accessing medication in that way and are seeing the benefits from it. But for me, I definitely don't see anything wrong with using your own judgment on that, because I think only you know whether it's going to be right for you or not. I'm
Okay.
yet to try it. So maybe I'll go upstairs after this and I'll take one of these beta blockers and I might completely change my mind and go, I should have been doing this for years. But I'm coming from the perspective of I never have
Yeah,
yet.
definitely individual based, person by person. You do what you think is best for yourself. Agree. Parallax Party is another comment. As I used to feel so demasculated that I'd avoid men altogether. I kind of still do, because even though I'm very bi, can't even picture having a relationship with a man. I've had sex with men before, but I've typecasted them in my head as not compatible romantically. And obviously, I, I, or there, I don't think either of us can be able to relate to this with an experience, but I think it almost is as if men are not really compatible romantically. I'm not saying that for all of them, obviously. It's very generalized, but a lot of men don't have those kind of skills because they're not used to opening up to people. They're not used to being vulnerable with their emotions. And they have to be tough. They have to be aggressive. And all of that doesn't really work well in relationships. So that might be why it's kind of been difficult, you know? At least in my mind, that's kind of what I think of with the issues.
See, I have had sexual experiences with men
Okay.
when I was younger and I was kind of exploring my sexuality and these kind of things. I was in very messy polyamorous relationships and kind of different things. But I can kind of see that I see what Parallax is saying, kind of based on his experiences with men when he was younger, and then kind of he now having these kind of preconceptions of what men are generally. I understand why you might find that difficult to have that kind of openness and that kind of affection and that kind of care that most people are looking for in a relationship. And I completely understand your point of view, is what I'm saying. I think that's something that's very individual, but I certainly respect you sharing it.
Yeah.
I think personally, what I want from a relationship is I want the power to be myself, essentially. And I was going to say ironically, but it's not even ironic. Something I always wanted to be in a relationship from a young age, apart from in my early 20s when I was trying to test myself and kind of push my limits and see if this kind of like life of monogamy, this kind of life of romance was something that I actually wanted. And it turns out it was. So I'm really pleased that I tried the opposite because it reaffirmed kind of everything I was looking for in a relationship. But what I actually want is I want somebody that allows me to be the opposite of all these stereotypes of what being a man is. Because I know that when I'm at home now, despite me fighting against it because I'm a stupid man, I know that I can be vulnerable. I know that I can be sensitive. I know that I can watch How to Train Your Dragon and cry my eyes out. There's a reason I've never watched Frozen because I will bawl and bawl and bawl. And that's what I've always looked for. And I understand that if that's what you're saying, Parallax, as well, and that's what you need in a romantic partner, somebody that has that kind of that emotional literacy, if you like. I think that's what we're saying. And that's what I've always wanted in a partner as well. So I completely understand where you're coming from.
I think that most people do. Or I'd hope, I think that's the best part of the relationship is being able to be yourself and not having to worry about all of this stigma and these things. So I'm glad you spoke up about that, both of you. ATG115 says, I used to take medication for my ADHD, but the side effects outweighed the benefits of it. I'd be able to focus, but then I wouldn't be able to eat or sleep, and I just hated feeling that way. As well as Bandito saying that he medicates and it works great, and his relationship with Bandito Mama and his kids have improved dramatically. And I think this ties back into what we were saying, where it's very individualistic and it depends on who you are and how you handle these medications. Absolutely. I don't know. I think it's just on a person by person basis. And I guess I would say, in most cases, I would recommend trying, but I wouldn't say that it's necessary. I don't think medication is necessary at all. It can be a benefit, but it's not needed. But I guess I'm more in my career inclined to look towards behavioral modification and treatment.
See, I do think that everybody has that kind of that ability to help themselves be better without the aid of medication. Because I think the general consensus is, and I think the mindset should be regarding medication, that it's a stepping stone to help you on the way. It's not going to be, say, this tablet or this prescription is going to cure what ails you. It's going to be the thing to get the snowball rolling. It's going to be that one thing that's going to give you that push to help you then begin the journey to finding yourself in a better place. It's an aid, not a cure. I think that should be the mindset when looking at medication.
Yeah, absolutely. I think right now I want to go ahead and give a closing statement. I think we might be about done here, but what I want to say is, from what I've seen and what I've read, the main things that, as far as men's health, should be taken into account. Like you'll hear this right now, and it's hard to put words into action. But working out a little bit every day will help. Changing your diet up, whether that's plant-based or eating less dairy or eating less meat, will help. And I think just being aware about what you might need to do to take care of yourself, going to get checked up every now and again. I think taking care of yourself is very important, and that's something we all need to realize in general. And don't take everything that we're saying lightly, you know. If this is something that you need to work more on and focus more on and taking care of yourself, you should absolutely do it. And I think personally for me, I'm going to try to do these things as well. I've raised awareness, hopefully for you guys, but not only that, for me as well. And I'm going to try harder to take care of myself. So I hope that this has been beneficial in some way to you guys. Euler, did you have anything that you'd like to say?
Yeah, I think my kind of closing remark would be, I'm no expert, and I'd never claim to be. Everybody's kind of learning every day, and to be honest with you, thank you to Kashak for having me here talking, because it's always nice to bring these things back to the forefront of your mind, even if you kind of feel that your views on something are concrete. It's always good to kind of refresh yourself, you know what I mean, and kind of give yourself an opportunity to take on a new perspective, or just to kind of reaffirm what you do think. And what I do think is this: I think kind of regardless of gender, regardless of anything, I think everybody has the capacity to be a beautiful person. And I think the kind of more that we're aware of that, and the more that we're conscious of it in kind of whatever avenue we take these topics down, whatever avenue these podcasts go down, whether we're talking about, I don't even know, if we were talking about gender, if we're talking about men's health, if we're talking about mental health, if we're talking about racism, if we're talking about sexuality, I think there is always, for me, now this is obviously my opinion, but I think there's always kind of, there's a clear cut kind of right and wrong mindset about this for me. If we're talking about kind of being a good person and kind of empowering each other to be kind of good and to be the beautiful people that we can be. And I think the more that we're aware of, as men, if we're more aware of kind of what our shortcomings can be, and I think and if we recognize that in our interactions with other men as well, you know, so if I were talking to Cash, I can really hard to put into words. Really hard to put into words. I know what I'm saying, but I'm just saying be excellent to each other. I think that's what I'm saying.
I think I understand what you mean. Cool. So before we close, I wanted to say a few reminders. I'm started a campaign for Movember that I've put up in the description of my channel, and I'm leaving that up throughout the month of June for anybody who came in a little late. So if you're interested in donating or showing some support to that organization, it'll be right there in description until the end of June. As always, I'd like to thank my guest Euler here for coming with me. He's a great guy. I love him dearly, and I'm glad that he was able to discuss this topic with me a little bit. It's like you said, it's very refreshing to bring these things up. Even if we've thought about them before, they can kind of go into the background of our minds, and just remembering again what we need to be, you know, doing or taking care of ourselves or being the best that we can be is very beneficial in this sense. So I want to give a shout out to the Euler. This is his channel. If you want to go check him out, if you've not already, go ahead and give him a follow. He's an amazing guy. And we're going to go ahead and pick a raid.